Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the next example on the topic of weak squares. And this example is pretty tough, so a small challenge to you. It is white to move here. It was a game between Botvinnik and Saulo Floor, one of the top players of their time. Botvinnik, obviously legendary world champion, but also Saulo Floor was an extremely strong player here. Black just played Queen e7, and as I said, now small exercise time for you. Botvinnik made quite a shocking decision, at least for me, but it was a very deep plan. So I'll reveal now what Botvinnik played. He played c5, which when I first saw this game was completely shocking to me, because usually you don't want to put the pawns exactly on the square as your opponent's bishop, which Botvinnik does here in this case. Usually you don't want to do it because then the bishop can attack these pawns if they're on the same color than the bishop. But in this case, Botvinnik decided it's actually not a big factor. The bishop can anyway not attack these pawns from behind since there are still enough pieces. And yeah, with this move c5 though, he had a deep plan, which was to bring this knight from c3 all the way over b1, a3, c4 to d6. And once he reaches that goal, which he did in the game, spoiler alert, then the knight on d6 is obviously a super powerful piece which can never be kicked out. Yeah, the pawn on d4 might look weak after his move c5, but Black can only go rook d8, and he's not able to attack this pawn any more than this, and we're protecting the pawn with our rooks as well, so there's nothing to gain for Black from this. Saulo Floor played a5, which was a strong move, since I also forgot to mention, this obviously is one big plan for white, but the other one is to play b4 and b5 to hit this pawn on c6, which can also be a target later on. So that's why Saulo Floor went a5 after c5, and now Botvinnik went for knight b1, and this knight begins his journey to the desired square on c6. Saulo Floor played queen f8, which was already a mistake. There was only one defense here for Black. Another good exercise for you. Let me flip the board for a second, and yeah, pause the video if you want to try and figure it out for yourself. So the defense would have been rook d5, and after knight a3 to play b6. So Black has to act very dynamically here, not to allow the knight to reach d6 in time, and after knight c4, b takes c5. The position is a huge mess. White is not worse, Black is not worse, it's just completely unclear. For example, after d5, queen h5, this double attack here, Black still has queen e7, and after these moves, rook e5, rook d7, queen f8, rook c7, White is preparing rook d7, and White is two pawns down, but the position is completely unclear. Computer spits out 0.00, obviously, but yeah. Anyway, this was the best defense for Black. Saulo Floor played queen f8, and after knight e3, bishop d8, knight c4. Now there is nothing Black can do to stop this plan, and the knight appears on d6, where it's just super powerful, hitting the pawn on b7. And yeah, whenever Black captures, which happened in the game, now we will get a protected passed pawn on d6. Black played rook b8, and now again Botvinnik played a very nice plan, which was rook b1. He realized that now there's not much he can do with his pieces anymore, but there needs to be a pawn break, and b4 turns out to be the correct pawn break to go for. So he plays rook b1, rook d8, and now b4. And after the exchange on b4, now we see that the pawn on b7 is hanging. So Black has to take on d6, and after e takes d6, the correct recapture, now we can also see the pawn on e6 is a big target, and which he also later managed to exploit. C takes d6, which would also yield a pretty big advantage for White, but now we don't have this target on e6 as we did in the game. Black played queen a5, rook b3, rook e8, and queen e2 happened in the game. He could also take on b7, which would also be winning, but he chose the slower approach to winning the game, I would say. After queen e8, rook e3, yeah, that game later on, it was pretty quickly that Botvinnik won. Now the pawn on e6 is a big target, and yeah, the other rook could also come around. Later in the game, he played queen c4, and then went with the other rook back to the e-file, and the pawn on e6 later on fell, and Botvinnik decided the game pretty quickly. So I think quite a shocking decision here with c5, but once you see this plan then with knight b1, knight a3, knight c4, knight d6, then it makes some sense, and yeah, I think another nice example for the topic of weak squares or strong squares. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can follow me on my socials, Twitter, Instagram. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel, would help me out a lot. You can also visit my website felixburger.com, and until then, thank you for watching and see you next time.